extreme male brain theory in respect of autism was misleading. And Simon has done an interview, or at least has spoken with The Guardian, and it's a really short article, so I'm going to probably read the whole thing and give my thoughts as we go along. The scientist who pioneered the extreme male brain theory of autism has said he regrets characterising the condition in this way because the phrase lends itself to misunderstandings. It's very clear, I think, that Simon is trying to distance himself as much as possible from this extreme male brain nonsense without actually, apologising perhaps for it. It's almost like he's putting all of the onus and all of the responsibility onto the reader of extreme male brain theory. And, it's nothing to do with him because that's not what he intended at all. And I'm almost surprised he didn't start quoting Bart's death of the author theory here. But I'll probably talk more about this theory in a video about autism and semiotics at some point. Cohen's theory that autistic people tend strongly towards systemizing over empathizing has been hugely influential in shaping the popular perception of autism over the last 2 decades. The underlying science had stood the test of time, he said, but he now views the extreme male brain label as unhelpful. And boy, is it unhelpful, and it's always been unhelpful. And of course, it immediately excludes women from the prospect of being diagnosed, doesn't it? And trans people and non-binary people, and of course men who don't meet this stereotypical idea of autism. And what really frustrates me about this is that the research paper on extreme male brain theory was published, I think, in 2002, which is a hell of a long time ago now, isn't it? And I'm sure that Simon realised that this framing was incorrect years ago, so why has it taken him until now to say anything about it? And I think autistic people have really suffered as a result of this. A lot of people, I think, still assume that autistic people are incapable of having empathy when we know this is so far removed from the truth. We know that very many autistic people do experience empathy, and in fact in this qualitative study of 76 autistic people, many reported being hyper empathetic, and anecdotally speaking, I would describe myself as being so. Some of those terms were very easily misunderstood again, and so I do regret that, he says. It can lead to simplistic headlines like autistic people lack empathy, which is not true. Some of that language, like male brain and female brain, I just don't think it's useful today. So Simon's arguing that it's not useful today. When was it useful? Speaking to The Guardian before the announcement of a £26 million gift to Cambridge University from the US philanthropist Lisa Yang, Baron-Cohen said the funding would be used for research guided by the priorities of the autistic community. It's one of the largest ever donations to a UK university for autism research, and it will be used to create the K. Lisa Yang Centre for Autism Research and a clinical autism centre in a future Cambridge Children's Hospital, both of which Baron-Cohen will oversee. And while it's great that this money is being invested into autism research, I can't help but feel a little bit of anxiety about Baron-Cohen heading up these centres, I have to say. The research centre is expected to focus on improving life expectancy and health outcomes for autistic people, earlier diagnosis and practical solutions to improve quality of life. The physical health of autistic people in particular is an area that has been overlooked, according to Baron-Cohen. I really hate how badly constructed this article is, or badly written, because it seems to jump from one theme to another really quite awkwardly. So it goes into some conversation around health now. So I just want to put in a little alert that if you do have any kind of health anxiety, I will put some chapters in this video, so it might be helpful for you to jump ahead to the next chapter. So if you want to do so, I'd suggest you do so now. Although people think of autism as to do with the mind and the brain, what's been neglected is the fact that autistic people tend to die younger, he says. Recent findings by his team, which are yet to be peer reviewed, suggest that autistic people are at substantially increased risk of cardiovascular disease. Based on the data from over 141,000 people, they concluded that autistic women were at 71% higher risk of a heart attack, stroke, and other serious cardiac events, even after taking into account known risk factors such as blood pressure, diabetes, and obesity. I can't believe they've just shoved this bit of information in here without any kind of pre-warning, because many autistic people are going to read this article and be really shocked and horrified by this information. But I think it is important to say that at this moment in time anyway, this isn't a peer-reviewed study. And while it does mention that blood pressure, diabetes and obesity have been taken into consideration, what isn't mentioned here actually is stress. And of course, we know that stress can cause real implications actually in terms of cardiovascular health and all health conditions in general, really. And of course, many autistic people are dealing with high levels of stress. And I know for me, throughout my whole working life, I was dealing with real high levels of anxiety. So I think it would be really interesting to see, hopefully through research, whether there is perhaps a correlation between autism and cardiovascular health, or whether it's actually stress that makes us more susceptible to heart conditions. And I think this would be just so useful to know about. If you'd asked me 20 years ago to look at autism and cardiovascular disease, it wouldn't have been on our radar, but it's come from the autism community. And while it's great that some kind of consultation is going on with autistic people in terms of their physical health, I'm a little unsure as to what Baron-Cohen means in respect of the autism community here, because we know the autistic community can be very different from the autism community. Reasons for the association could include difficulty accessing NHS services, lifestyle or genetic factors. It suggests if your patient is autistic, you need to be looking for these particular things as well. It could have a direct benefit. Why has it taken so long to get here? I'm sure, almost every autistic person will be able to tell you of an instance of being gaslit by their GP over their physical health. It's really infuriating. The centre is also likely to explore physical health experiences of autistic women, including childbirth and menstrual-related distress, which some previous findings indicate may be more common. That could relate to the sensory hypersensitivity, but it could be directly hormonal as well. The dialogue within the autism community is changing where we shine a light and which are the phenomena or the problems that need attention and that were being neglected. And again, this is really useful. We know that very many autistic women have been struggling their entire lives, and I'd like to see, of course, menopause included in this as well. For me personally, I found out I was autistic because I was experiencing just a really awful perimenopause, and all of my autistic traits were just ramping up to the extent that it was causing me real distress. So it then encouraged me to go and seek an autism diagnosis. But we've waited too long for this, haven't we? And I really feel for previous generations of autistic women and AFAB people that have just had to get on with it. Baron-Cohen has previously sparked controversy in the autism community dating back to his extreme male brain theory, which was criticised for framing autism as an empathy deficit and reinforcing gender stereotypes. In fact, he said his own research showed that autistic people tend to differ in cognitive empathy, which is interpreting facial expressions and language, but not affective empathy, which is the internal response to others' feelings. Once they know that someone is upset, it upsets them and they want to do something about it, he said. There's a kind of myth that autistic people lack empathy. Simon, if you've known this for years, why haven't you said something earlier? Honestly, the damage that this extreme male brain theory has done for autistic people, I think it's going to take years and if not decades for us to recover from. Because I think if you were to ask the average person who doesn't really know anything about autism, what an autistic person would look like, they'd be male, white, and into train spotting, or perhaps like Rain Man. There has so much damage that's been done by this extreme male brain theory. More recently, Baron-Cohen's team faced a backlash over a plan to sequence the genomes of 10,000 autistic people, which eventually resulted in the project being dropped after a 2-year consultation with the autistic community. He said there was now a far greater emphasis on consultation at an early enough stage for research priorities to be shaped or enriched by the inputs of autistic people. So this is in respect of the Spectrum 10K projects, and it's bonkers that this ever got off the ground even at a consultation level. And I think it really shows the power of dissent and community, because autistic people were saying no very loudly, so the project was binned. So the article then talks about the increase of autism diagnoses in recent years, and some argue that overdiagnosis is to blame, but Baron-Cohen dismissed the idea that people would seek a diagnosis in a casual way. His team is doing a pilot of whether GPs can diagnose autism as accurately as specialist referral centres, which he said could cut the waiting lists overnight. And while I think it's great that alternative solutions are being thought about for diagnosing autistic people, I do worry about more and more work being ploughed on GPs, and we know that they're already overworked and overstressed. So I don't know, I'm in two minds about this as a solution, really. And at a time when people already struggle to get GP appointments, if no more GPs are recruited to help out with this backlog, I think we can already guess how this is going to play out in the media, and this will only lead to the demonisation of autistic people. I think it's very clear that the NHS is drastically underfunded, and that is where the problem is. And that's where the article ends. It's written so clumsily, but I don't know, I come away from reading this both heartened, I guess, by the idea of funding into autism and health conditions experienced by autistic people, but also feeling really deflated because Simon Baron-Cohen could have admitted this years ago. I feel like the damage has been done, hasn't it? And it's going to take, I don't know, a lot of time until people start thinking differently about autism. And I think also the timing of this is quite interesting because we know recently that Dame Ute Frith spoke about her revised opinion of autism now, and she feels that the autism spectrum is now too broad to be meaningful in any way. So she has made it very clear that she sees people like me, a late diagnosed female, as probably not being autistic because I don't fit her very narrow idea of what autism is. And she's received huge backlash as a result of these newly formed opinions, or perhaps they're not newly formed, who knows. But it's interesting that Simon Baron-Cohen was a mentee of Uta Frith, and together with Alan Leslie, they co-authored the paper on a theory of minds. So I don't know, it's almost like he's trying to distance himself at a time when he needs input from the autistic community. But I just wish that he'd said all of this years ago. Once he realised that he was wrong, it would have been so helpful, instead of the whole, this is a misunderstanding kind of thing, because that itself makes me feel very uncomfortable. But anyway, I would love to know your thoughts on this article, and I will leave it linked down below if you want to kind of read it separately. But yeah, it's really frustrating, isn't it? And I don't know, it just feels like it's going to take such a long time for the public to understand what autism is and how autism can present differently in autistic people, and there's just so much work to be done. But thank you for watching, and give it a like if you got this far. Comments would always be appreciated, and if you don't know what to say, leave me an orange heart down below for friendship, and I'll see you again soon.